Schneider. So Susan, for those who don't know you, can you say a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm the NASA chair at the Library of Congress and NASA. I'm a philosopher. I'm the director of the AI Mind and Society group at the University of Connecticut. I'm also a cognitive scientist, and I dabble a bit in astrobiology as well.
Wow, that's quite a lot there. That's cool. So this group at the University of Connecticut is a new thing that's recently started, or how long has that been going on?
Yeah, it just started a few years ago, and I have several fabulous graduate students and great colleagues. I really like the faculty at the University of Connecticut. They're very smart, and everybody gets along really well. No fighting, no factions. Oh,
that's good. I remember I was a student at Connecticut for a year, and I can certainly concur with that. The faculty are amazing, and the students are great too. There was a lot of, I wish more philosophy departments were like that, friendly and open, and kind of a sense of working together as opposed to like striving to like be the smartest one in the room.
Yeah, I mean, we're really into all kinds of philosophy. So, you know, we have some of the biggest thinkers in areas like Africana philosophy, Chinese philosophy. We're also really big in epistemology, cognitive science, logic.
Yeah.
And, yeah, everybody appreciates the contributions of others, and we don't feel like we're in a tug of war.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something like coming from there to New York, it was kind of sort of the opposite, let's say. But anyway, so I'm glad that you're there and that you're enjoying it. And I want to talk to you obviously about this exciting new book that you have here, which I have just finished reading for the second time, actually.
Oh my God, twice?
Yeah, well, it was good. And there were some parts I wanted to mull over a little bit more, but.
This isn't a beer, everybody.
And that's your story you're sticking with, right? Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So this is a very exciting book. Putting together a lot of themes that you've been working on in various different places, sort of drawing together. Would you say a little bit about how you came to write the book and how you conceived of the overall project of it?
Yeah, sure. My dog is about to just lose it. Hold on. Teddy. Oh, Teddy will make an appearance. He was on the last podcast too.
Hey, Teddy.
Just in case I bore the crap out of you, I did show you the puppy. Okay, so I get annoyed by all these technologists, all these AI experts who also think they're an expert on humanity's future, right?
Right.
So I think it's important that we realize that science is going really fast in all sorts of directions, ranging from gene editing to data science. And it's extremely important that we understand the proper social uses of the technology and what the technology could actually achieve for human flourishing. And so the book is not comprehensive. I mean, I develop different problems that I think people don't understand. So I think people need to have a better sense of the whole conscious robot thing before they start giving rights to robots that just look human without looking inside of the system and determining if it's conscious. I'm more skeptical about machine consciousness than a lot of the transhumanists, so I take them to task.
Right.
I also take people like John Searle to task in his Chinese room thought experiment as prematurely dismissing the possibility of conscious machines. So I take a wait and see approach. And then half the book is on the future of the mind itself, on whether we could, say, add microchips to the brain and still be us in any meaningful sense. And the last substantive chapter is on deep questions that connect with my earlier work, whether the mind is a program, because I think a lot of people in this day and age of cognitive science and the internet often take that idea too far. And I actually argue that the mind is not a program. Okay. People might find that funny because, my earlier books on the language of thought, but as I point out, just because the brain is computational and can be described computationally does not mean that the metaphysical nature of the mind is that it's a program. For one thing, a program is an abstract object. So there I have to talk a little bit about stuff in philosophy of mathematics, like what is it to be an abstract entity?
Right.
So I mean, basically, I wanted the book to kind of straighten out some of the philosophical issues that I thought other books on AI don't do.
Yeah, and it does a great job of that. But I mean, it's the books like by Bostrom and these other guys. They focus a lot on the kind of threats that AI may pose to us, but they don't really deal with the human side of it, and actually the sociological or political side of it, which you draw a lot of that kind of stuff out, and that's overlooked a lot in this debate. So I think that's really nice to have this kind of contribution at this moment.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned Bostrom because he and Elon Musk and Ray Kurzweil and so many others, Stephen Hawking, the former Stephen Hawking, they all suggest that the mind is a program. So, they have a philosophy, but it's, kind of technotopian, assuming that the sort of teleology for the development of artificial intelligence is that it goes inside the head and it gives us immortality, a sort of technophiles immortality, and we can just become cyborgs and not have any philosophical problems about the self or mind. Of course, we'll continue. So all these things are kind of taken for granted. So in a way, I feel like there is a philosophy there. I've been a transhumanist myself for years. And I remember even in college being fascinated by the views of people like Ray Kurzweil. But now I think, oh my gosh, I think this philosophy is horribly flawed. I still adopt the main tenets of transhumanism in the general sense, that we should use technology to increase the lifespan of humans, and we should try to get past our limitations. But I believe it has to be done very carefully and with the utmost reflection, and we understand what technology can and cannot achieve.
Right, and that's not really being done at this moment, right? There's not a lot of, there's some careful philosophers, like David Chalmers. His work is pretty careful in this area, but he's not as popular as like a Kurzweil or these other, other characters maybe in the mainstream, and they're not as careful. That I think is for sure.
Yeah. Well, Chalmers has done wonders with the problem of consciousness, right? And I think that's really the centerpiece of the book, is what consciousness is and why we need to think about the things that can go wrong with the use of AI in the head and misunderstanding machine consciousness.
Yeah.
And, I owe a lot to that. And I look forward to, I think he's writing a book on virtual reality. So I'm hoping that takes off.
Yeah, he's trying to coin the term techno-philosophy, last I heard, like neurophilosophy, the use of technology to think about philosophy.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I love that. I mean, that I think that's good. And I think it needs to be separated from what I call techno-optimism, which is this view that says that, of course, if we create artificial general intelligences or super intelligences, they'll inevitably be conscious beings, and that we could merge with AI in our future.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that I really liked about the book is your wait and see approach, because I lean towards biological naturalism. That's sort of where my hopes are. But I'm willing to be convinced, by the other side. And I think about this stuff a lot. So it's very refreshing to see someone who's like, yeah, well, we don't really know. Let's think it through both sides and see where the problems are, as opposed to coming out strongly in favor of one or the other. And then, I mean, there's a lot that I wanted to ask you about, but you brought up the program idea, the mind is a program. And so you argue against that. So one of your main arguments, I think you kind of mentioned it just now, is that programs are abstract kind of mathematical objects, and that persons are spatio-temporal. And so there just seems to be some kind of category error here on these guys' part, thinking that we are abstract objects. And instead you say, well, maybe they might say we're implementations of programs, right? So that we're a particular running of a program on some hardware. And so there, I guess I was a little more confused about what the objection was. As far as I understood it, the objection was like, well, they don't really tell us when it's the same or not. Until we have that.
Question back. So the dialectic is, the context of the discussion is radical enhancements, whether it be uploading or gradually merging with AI through the use of several chips to replace parts of the brain. And the transhumanists usually support the view that the human will become post-human and the individual still survives in virtue of the fact that the mind is a program. And they support their view by appealing to things like the computational theory of the mind in cognitive science, which a lot of philosophers of mind agree with. And so that sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds legitimate.
Yeah, it gives it an air of legitimacy. Okay, but if you think about the issue, first of all, let me just mention that philosophers of mind who are advocates of CTMs, whether they be, connectionist types or language of thought types or whatever, they're not talking about persistence at all. They're not talking about the conditions under which a given mind may survive. To talk the talk of persistence, I think there needs to be a lot more going on in terms of argumentation. And if you think about what a program is, okay, a program is a lot like a mathematical equation, right? And, an equation isn't located anywhere, right? I mean, you can make an inscription of an equation somewhere, but the equation itself is an abstract entity, like Plato's forms, okay? So if you're a program, you're an abstract entity. Now, I think that that's highly questionable, maybe a category mistake. I mean, somebody could try to make the argument that they're an abstract entity, but they should do it up front, and they have a lot of argumentation that they owe us. It seems like we're concrete. In fact, I mean, I think that one thing that's absolutely essential to a mind is that it be a conscious being, and consciousness itself seems to be in time. It's a temporal phenomena, I think. And, our minds are capable of initiating change through our thoughts. And we seem, as selves and persons, to be located in space-time. Now, there are some really important and intriguing debates in physics about, the nature of space-time. And, I'm not saying these are easy issues, but I'm just saying it looks like just saying that the mind is a program requires a lot more debate than just saying, well, the computational paradigm in cognitive science is really, really interesting and important.
Right.
Okay. Well, then the next move is, oh, well, what I meant to say, Susan, is just that the mind is a program instantiation. It's a particular that runs the program. And my response to that is like, sure. I mean, I don't really have a problem with that. I mean, look, I was an advocate of computational theory of the brain, but could you please tell me then what is the thing running the program? Because you were beginning the discussion with the account of the persistence of a person. So you had something you were claiming about a person or a mind, and now you just tell me that it's this thing that runs the program. Right? I need to understand under what conditions that thing even survives and what that thing is. I mean, could that thing be an immaterial mind? I mean, in principle, yeah. I mean, Hilary Putnam, as a functionalist, always said, these functional descriptions can be satisfied by non-physical entities. So I think that's just the beginning of the debate.
Yeah.
Right?
So I guess what confuses me about that is the move that you're attributing to that side, saying that it's the thing which runs the program, which is what the mind is. Whereas why wouldn't, and I don't defend this view. I mean, I don't really think of the mind as like a software that runs on the computer, the brain. I'm not against that view. I just don't really find it intuitive. However, why isn't the view that they would be defending more like it's the running of the program which is what the mind is. And yeah, it's ran on the brain, and it could be run on other things perhaps, but it's the actual execution of the set of instructions, which is what the mind is, as opposed to the thing which is running it.
Right. Okay. So that gets into issues about the ontology of events, right? I mean, so I think it depends on what your theory of events is then. Okay, tell me what it is to execute a program. I mean, you know, if you look at the events literature,
it's a mess.
The most success. Yeah. I mean, some people like Davidson and Quine, you know, would take events in terms of just space-time regions. So we're back at the issue of what is that thing or substance, right? And of course, the traditional objection to that theory of events was precisely to turn events into objects. But then you could instead say that events are property instantiation. So Lewis and Kim, for instance, had theories along those lines. Well, property instantiations connects right up with theories of substance. So one of the leading theories of the nature of substance simply bundles substances based on the properties. So the bundle theory of substance says an object is just a bundle of properties. So I think these are all just theories that are basically saying the same thing.
I see. So do you think the same thing about, is there the same problem with Microsoft Word running on my Mac right now? Do you think there's an issue there as well? Or it seems pretty straightforward without having to go as deep into metaphysics as we are right now to say when the computer is executing the program versus when it's not.
Okay, so here's the thing. The Mac is an artifact, so it gets into the metaphysics of objects, and it gets into issues involving, you know, how individuals understand, you know, human-made devices, the metaphysics of objects, which is super interesting, super important. I mean, there are metaphysicians who've written entire books on the subject.
Yeah.
But living things, that you get into a very distinctive category there, and the whole issue becomes very, very vexing because we're now talking about conscious beings and we're talking about persons, you know. So when we're doing that, I think it's all the issues that you can imagine put together.
Right.
Right? And my point is that these are vexing questions. So, you know, like we like to talk about solutions to the puzzle of personal identity or to the mind-body problem. They're fun in philosophy class and when we're like drinking with friends. But would you bet your life on your solution? In the book, I illustrate that how you solve the issue is going to make a difference to whether you survive, right?
Right.
You walk in, like at the beginning of the book, I use the example of the Center for Mind Design. Like you walk in, say it's 2040, and you could choose from a bundle of enhancements. What would you choose, right? And so really metaphysics is a matter of life and death when it comes to AI. So that's kind of why I wrote the book.
Yeah, it comes out very, I mean, that is a good point because a lot of times I feel like metaphysics ruins everything. And now it's turning out to be quite important, actually.
Good. Well, I'm glad it's going to make people who don't like metaphysics pay attention. I love metaphysics. It's like my favorite area, really. Like I do philosophy of mind as a metaphysician. I mean, I love it. I love thinking about the fundamental nature of reality. And that infuses my work in applied ethics as well. Like a lot of people call me and, you know, applied ethicists now. You know, but I mean, really it's the metaphysics that is driving the book.
So on that point, it seems like you're really reluctant to take a deflationary account of the self seriously. And you like I've seen you address this point before, and you know there's Buddhist traditions, and even I think Dave in his section of the Singularity paper where he discusses this briefly the issue of the self, basically says, you know, it's no different than when you go to sleep and wake up in the morning. You're a different person basically if you take a certain view of the self. So there's no fact of the matter, and parfait obviously. So, but you seem like you want to resist that. A lot of this hinges on there being an actual fact of the matter about whether you survive or not.
That's a super great question. I really appreciate that. And so, you're right. This is an important tradition in Western philosophy and within Buddhism. And I respect it very much. So, I mean, I talk about it in the book, probably not as much as I wanted to. But some transhumanists, like I think Nick Bostrom, sometimes footnotes that as a possibility. I think he's very sympathetic to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to give some background. So I imagine many of your listeners are familiar with the work of Derek Parfit and, you know, the no self view. And, you know, the idea here is that there's no persisting self at all. I have a lot of philosophical problems actually with his position, but I won't get into all that. Okay. But in any case, if there's no self, then radical enhancement is a very real possibility because you choose a future path based on other considerations. So you might feel, for example, like you want to maximize superintelligence or that your successor, whatever that thing is. And see, that's where it's like, it sounds like he's talking the self-talk, but that being, you know, as a sentient being has a great existence. And so you might want to choose a certain post-human future for your successor that maximizes conscious experience or something like that.
Right.
Right. And so
well, I mean, just not to cut you off, but I mean, we do that anyway now. I mean, if I teach an 8 a.m. logic class, and if someone says, go out drinking with me, I say, well, I would love to, but I don't want to wake up with a hangover in the morning. And I don't really think of, I mean, yeah, I think I'm kind of sympathetic to no self-view. I think what I'm thinking is, yeah, that person's, the morning guy is going to be really screwed if I go out tonight. So let's consider the morning guy.
It's so vexing, right? Because I think, here's the way I would put it. Suppose I handed you a picture of Richard Brown's kindergarten class.
Uh-huh. And I didn't go to kindergarten, but all right. I went to first grade.
Oh, skipped kindergarten.
I'm old. My mom didn't let me go to school until I was legally required. But anyway, yeah. So I get your point, though.
First grade class.
Yeah.
And I suppose I'm a time traveler. All right.
Yeah.
And I go, hey, Richard, which is you? And you go, I'm this one, this little guy here. Okay. And being an awful mean time traveler, I said, I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to wipe that little boy right off, you know, the planet with my laser gun. Sorry. Now,
you are from the future.
You're going to feel like, oh, shit, then I won't be here now.
I'm not sure if I would feel that way, actually. Really? Well, I think that kid's already gone. He didn't survive. I'm here now.
Well, you really walk the walk, and all the power to you. And so the reason that I wrote this part of the book is so that people understand what they're getting themselves into. Because again, it's a matter of life and death potentially one day. So if you really are that confident in the no self view, then you make your enhancement decisions in a way that is compatible with that.
So, I mean, obviously the person that you're talking to now would cease to exist because of the continuity relationships between the kindergarten, first grade person and me. And so that would give me a reason to say, you know, don't kill him. But it's not that I would be worried that killing him is killing me is kind of the point that I'm thinking. But so I'm not that confident. I just think this is the view that neuroscience is pointing to, that a deflationism about the self seems most compatible with what we know about the brain.
See, now that I don't understand. Okay, so because nothing about neuroscience is going to tell us whether there's a persisting self. I mean, you could take all the physical facts, right? You could have a perfect understanding of, you know, the spatiotemporal mosaic of properties in the universe. And suppose you're, you know, a genius and you can process everything, but you don't know the philosophical facts about the self. I don't think you're going to be able to infer from the location of properties in space-time whether there's something like a persisting self. That
I guess I see what you're saying, but I guess what I was thinking was that from the cognitive neurosciences, we talk a lot about the self schema. the self is just a kind of collection of beliefs about what you've been through and where and so forth, and involving episodic memories of that sort of nature, blah, blah, blah. So what else is there? I mean, you know, there's the body, and then there's a representation of it, and that's connected, and it's part of the self schema, but that's
yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I hear you. I mean, so I would say though that the issue of our self-concept and the way we represent the self and body is extremely interesting and important, but I don't think that's the very same thing as the metaphysics of personal identity, although it can inform it. So for instance, there's a famous neuroscientist who, she was in the shower and she had a stroke.
Yeah, she wrote a book about that.
Insight, Donna Williams, right? Was that her name? Or no, I got her name wrong.
I don't know her name, but she wrote a book about this.
Yeah, it's called My Stroke of Insight.
Yeah.
Anyway, she claims that her sense of self went completely offline due to the damage, right? And you can imagine being like a Zen master meditator who gets to a point where he or she doesn't experience the self for maybe, you know, several hours or 10 minutes or whatever. That's still a person. In both of those cases, the self concept comes along with the way our brain operates, but it's not, you know, what is essential to the nature of the person. I mean, there are alternate theories here, like maybe the person is her brain, or maybe the mind is just the soul, right?
Right.
As per Descartes and lots of world religions. So I don't think neuroscience is going to be able to prove whether we persist over time, right? I think that's a religious debate.
I think that yeah, but I understand your point. It's well taken. I mean, certainly there's lots to argue about here. I guess I was mostly just asking about, I mean, I guess you're answering me by what you're saying, but I was just curious about why you resist the deflationary view so much, because it does. I know you talk about it and it comes up, but you're like, there's always a further fact, and it just seems like there's got to be a further fact about it. But I just don't have those intuitions.
Yeah, fair
so
enough.
I'm just curious about why you do it. In fact, in the case we're talking about with the stroke of insight, just seems like, yeah, she was a different person. That person was gone. I don't think there was a person there. It's not clear that there was a person there if the self schema has disappeared.
Okay. So so you raised a lot of issues. So in terms of the deflationary position, I take it as being one of the most important positions on the debate over the nature of the person. And what I encourage is what I call metaphysical humility, right? Yeah. So when you're making these decisions to enhance, should you ever have an opportunity, you should do it in a way that is compatible with your own views. And I think that it's disingenuous for techno-optimists to act as if it's an inevitable path that we should enhance and that we will survive. So my point is to do public service work in a way.
Right.
Okay. And in a way, I put my own views on the back burner. I'm happy to talk about them, but I don't really put them out there in the book in terms of like what I suspect about the nature of the person. Instead, what I want to do is something I'm a little bit more confident in, which is you can look at a position and show that it has internal problems. And when you do that, you can do it in a way that people from different vantage points agree about.
Right.
You can get a lot of progress. You can make a lot of progress in that way. And so by showing that the self isn't a program, for instance, I can quickly illustrate the import of moving beyond just Elon Musk's pronouncements when he's talking about Neuralink. I mean, he's literally telling people, and the media listens to him wholeheartedly.
Yeah, they gobble it up.
They gobble it up, you know, and so do the Silicon Valley types. And you know, it's that we should merge with AI because it's the way we can manage technological unemployment, which is coming, right?
Oh, yeah.
And we can keep up with super intelligent AI. So it's almost as if the AI companies are deciding what the future of the mind should be.
Yeah, that's
I find
scary.
that awful. I find
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
not that I have any problem with these individuals at all. I work with them every day. I mean, hey, I love Elon. I drive one of those like fast ass Teslas. I'm all over it. All right. Space elevator, Mars. Yeah, I'm a geek. Okay. But I mean, oh my God, the mind is not a commodity.
Yeah.
And, you know, people have to understand that if Facebook and Google start merging us with AI to sell more products until, you know, data is what they want.
Right.
Right.
That's the ultimate data is
data, right? And so if it's said to be obvious that you'll benefit and you'll survive, well, no, not if you don't continue to exist because you've made some stupid decision.
Right.
But you're right. It could be that there is no persisting self.
It seems like it seems like on your own view, though, it's not something that can be scientifically decided. So it doesn't seem like it can be decided at all. So it doesn't seem like there's.
Yeah, but don't give up on the mind just because of that. I mean, just like it would be a bad thing if everybody took from this book that, oh shit, I can't figure out the answer, so I'm just going to enhance in these radical ways. I mean, that could be very nihilistic, right? Because one of these views could be true. I mean, for example, for many people who like cognitive science, they probably like the idea that the mind is the brain and that their own survival depends on having a properly functioning brain.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, I just did this piece for the Financial Times, an op-ed, where I said, look, you know, follow the money here with these brain chips, right? Follow the money. Okay, I'm going to give you a calculating chip. I'm going to give you a working memory enhancement chip. I'm going to, you know, keep going, let you link up to your loved ones. Well, how much space do we have in our heads?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
are they going to take out the appendix and add chips there? Because if they're scooping out gray matter, or if they're damaging gray matter, at what point do you die? If the mind is the brain.
Yeah,
right.
That's right. I mean, and with this like prosthetic hippocampus thing, they're already like testing in humans, and they're saying there's going to be collateral damage. Like in planning, it's going to damage things around, not to mention replace part of the hippocampus. So yeah, it's not clear which part you lose, and then that's it for you. So it's an important question.
If your hippocampus is already damaged, as is the case with the individuals right now, right, I support the therapeutic use of anything we can to make these people's lives better. So if you don't have a working hippocampus and you get one, that's a good thing.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's a really good thing. And, you know, that alone is hopefully not going to stop the person from being the person they were from a metaphysical standpoint. So I'm not objecting to the use of brain therapy, although I can't imagine that there could be a therapy that actually could cause substantive changes.
Right.
But then again, it's up to the individual to make that decision for herself.
Right.
I think she needs to understand
if there is one.
What's at stake, you know. But if you want to know my views of the nature of a person, I'll tell you, I don't think we know jack right now.
Okay.
So here's what I think. I think we don't understand the nature of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we know that the answer to that isn't bound up with the personal identity debate? It could be that persisting conscious moments are basic, and we could string together some sort of survival in that way. I mean, I think Richard Swinburne might have had that kind of a view. I mean, of course, the problem is what happens when you go to sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's gaps.
Mind the gap.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Don't fall in. Yeah.
But I mean, it could be that, you know, once we start enhancing our brains, because people are going to do it.
Yeah, they're going to do it.
They're going to do it. And, you know,
I'm going to do it.
Oh yeah, if it makes you a better philosopher. I mean, you know, it's cost benefit analysis, you know, but maybe you'll discover the answer to the mind-body problem.
Maybe, yeah, we'll be a lot smarter.
Yeah.
I mean, one view that doesn't get a lot of, sorry, but one view that doesn't get a lot of discussion, which I kind of would like to bring up, is the existential view. Stemming from, existentialism, Sartre and those guys. So on their view, as I understand about what a person is bound up with a project, like an aiming towards something in the future. So in that sense, as long as you sort of have the same goals, the same projects, you're the same person. If those change, then the kind of person changes. What do you think about that kind of view? I mean, you don't talk about it a lot, but I wonder, it's a kind of a, Sartre's famous saying, I am what I am not, and I am not what I am. So the idea is that—
That's interesting. I mean, it reminds me of Heidegger too, right? Dasein is always aiming into the future, projecting into the future, and, Dasein is—
well, all of Sartre's work is
clearing. I mean, I think that all these issues need to be debated, right? I mean, I personally, I disagreed with Heidegger. I don't know as much about Sartre. You can see my screen name is Nietzsche, so I like him. He was a no-self person. He wrote The I is a Grammatical Fiction.
Right.
Yeah, he's my favorite existentialist. Of course, I don't know if he really was an existentialist, but yeah. But yeah, I mean, all these things are fodder for the sort of conversations people need to have about the future of enhancement.
Right. It does really bring it home. It's like, if you don't want to die, you need to think about personal identity in this context. But so, I mean, I just still don't, I wonder why you think that you have shown that we're not a program, because so let's suppose that I say I am a program, I'm an abstract object. That's instantiated in some physical stuff here, could be instantiated in physical stuff there.
A program instantiation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but what you really are is the program. So if you really are Platonic in this sense, the program is the program that it is because of its relation to the abstract thing. So the two work together. So you could still say I'm a program.
You need the participation of the form issues and all kinds of stuff, but that the thing is concrete in the instantiation view.
Right.
That is to say, it's in the spatiotemporal continuum. But the program view itself, the first view, which is just, biting the bullet and saying that person is abstract, is a different kind of beast.
I'm just wondering why. I'm not sure if I see that they're different.
Well, to be a program instantiation means that you're a concrete object of some sort. So the question there is, what is that substance, or what are the property instantiations that are implicated in running the program? Right.
So I guess what I'm sort of drawing on is your own work about how abstract objects individuate their concrete things. So this is from your philosophy of physics, philosophy of mind stuff. And I don't, why couldn't something like that work here? That, the program is part of what, the abstract part of it's part of what individuates the physical stuff, which is implementing it. So they're bound up in that way, and they come as a package. So that's saying, well, it's either one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so abstracta can individuate
and become part of the essential nature of the thing.
Right. And so then you get right into that. So I think personally, what we need to do if we want an object to be concrete is not have the abstract entities all by themselves individuate. Right. There needs to be some other individuator besides just numbers. Otherwise, the issue does come up.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and presumably, if we are spatiotemporal beings, and this gets into ontology of properties and stuff like that. I mean, I think that metaphysics in general needs to talk more about what is basic. I think,
You're not going to say the G word, are you?
What's the G word?
Oh, grounding.
No, I was just going to say, if, really it's about dispositions and causation and stuff. I mean, to me, when I went to graduate school, David Lewis was still alive, and we were reading a lot of David Lewis, who was great to think about, but I just think that kind of ontology is getting us into a lot of trouble. And by that, I mean an ontology which rejects causation and change is fundamental.
Right.
Something, I think there needs to be push and pull to the universe. And there's also a related, issue in physics nowadays.
Yeah, well, they reject causation at the fundamental level, one would say.
Well, I mean, there's so much going on. I mean, it's really exciting. Like I'm at the Institute for Advanced Study a lot. Like I'm I think I have an office there still, in fact. It's so neat to see what's going on in the domain of the nature of space-time right now, because to some of the string theorists that I talk to and some of the people who do like loop quantum gravity and whatnot, they're taking reality to almost be mathematical. And that's supposed to somehow give rise to space-time, right? There's this talk of space-time emergence and whatnot.
Right.
And you get people like Max Tegmark, who argues in a recent book that reality is mathematical, right? And so there is a debate about what reality is. But to me, see, and I think it does connect with this mind is program issue, because if reality is mathematical and we're like Pythagoreans, how do we get any change in the world? And how is it even the case that consciousness exists? I mean, consciousness is the felt quality of experience. I mean, what breathes fire into the loss, right? That's the real question. Stephen Hawking asked, what brings fire into the equations, right? And I think that's a great question. What is the underlying thing that is satisfying the program,
right,
or running the program? And what is it that brings about change in the universe?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way I understand modern physics is that the equations are describing patterns. There's what there is, there's a bunch of patterns, and we have a way of describing them mathematically, and that's it. And there's no cause and effect as a higher level property, but at the basic level, it's not there, at least not.
Well, that's it. Yeah, that's a kind of Lewis conception.
Yeah.
I actually, in my papers in metaphysics, I disagree with that kind of a view. And it is important to realize that, these substantive issues about the mind's nature do relate very deeply to debates about the nature of properties.
Right.
So the next book that my readers should delve into would be Peter Unger's 650-page book on dispositions. Just kidding. But seriously, stuff's related and important.
Yeah, I like his work.
No, I mean, it's just that literature, the dispositions literature, right?
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine these technologists
reading that?
Yeah, I mean, it is these debates which are important to have. And, I think my 2 cents is that simply saying the mind is a program is super question begging. It puts, it does say the mind is an abstract object. And if you're gonna run that kind of an argument, you do need to bite the bullet and start presenting an ontological case for that, like a case that maybe draws from some of the work in physics or something. I mean, my experience with the physicists who make these claims is actually that they think abstract entities are causal, which is not the same as it is in the literature and philosophy of mathematics, which defines an abstract entity as acausal and unchanging. So
there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, super. I mean, super interesting stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wonder maybe if I could switch topics slightly, because talking about the self is
tiring.
It's exhausting for me, but I understand that it's important. But so let's talk about your views on consciousness and intelligence. In particular, you make a kind of, in my mind, a strong claim saying that to have a mind requires consciousness. So that if we built AI, but it lacked consciousness, I guess the implication would be they don't have minds at all and wouldn't have any kind of moral standing, because you also sort of associate moral standing with having the conscious experience. And so I kind of wanted to press on that a little bit, because I guess I have a different feeling. It seems to me that a super intelligent, or even just a normal intelligent AI without any consciousness, still would be wrong to stop it from doing the things that it wanted to do or intended to do. It seems like there's a kind of sense of autonomy that you would violate, which doesn't have anything to do with causing it pain or discomfort. But so I just wonder why you go for this strong route equating consciousness with mind. And
that's really interesting. I mean, so I think Brian McLaughlin feels that way.
Yeah.
He suspects that AIs that are highly intelligent should actually be in that moral compass where, like, we normally put sentient beings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so just to kind of clarify, I mean, something can be morally significant in all sorts of ways and not be conscious, right? But yeah, when you start talking about autonomy and the being isn't conscious, that's an interesting move, right? It's a different move. So I just think that there's been a long tradition to think of sentience or consciousness as being constitutive of mindedness. And that just strikes me as a good path because it does help with the ethics. For me, when it comes to these issues, I think ethics has to come first.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Right. Like, I wrote the book because of the impact AI could have on human flourishing. And so I think if we start calling things minded that aren't conscious, we could potentially make all sorts of mistakes on the ethics and legislation front, where we consider machines that are not conscious to deserve, say, rights or consideration in a utilitarian calculus alongside sentient beings.
So, but why would that be a mistake? So if you're a preference utilitarian and these things have preferences, shouldn't they be counted? I mean, so it wouldn't be maximizing happiness per se, but certainly some versions of utilitarianism sort of seem to straightforwardly imply that they should count. And certainly deontology, I would say, straightforwardly says, yeah, if they have autonomy, then it's important.
Okay, so walk me through this, because if you're a preference utilitarian, isn't the idea that you want to maximize the pain and pleasure of the being? So
well, I think that preference utilitarian, actually, that's their whole point, is to get away from that and to say what you want to do is maximize what they prefer, like what it is what they desire or want.
But isn't the idea, though, I mean, I know that it's about preferences, but isn't it because it feels like something for these beings that their preferences even matter? I mean, I imagine this view didn't anticipate that.
Right. No, but it's compatible with it. I agree. Yeah. Right. But yeah, I mean, I think they did it because they want to avoid weird things about masochists or whatever. It's like they want. So you don't want to just maximize happiness, but.
Great. No, I agree. I agree with you. And this might be a situation where a moderate revision to the theory could be very useful, right?
Right.
It's certainly against the intent. I mean, philosophers, we can talk forever about what has preferences. We can get lost in a language game, right? And it's late in the day, and we probably don't want to do that to the listeners. But I mean, the real issue here is what deserves that special moral consideration. And I think that giving even a superintelligence the same consideration in terms of rights or protections that we give a conscious being, even if it's my dog, Teddy the poodle, is not right. It's not a good idea. It doesn't feel like anything to be that super intelligence unless we find out it's conscious, right?
No, let's just assume they're not for the sake of this discussion.
Yeah, it's the capacity for something to be sentient that causes us to be careful the way we treat it, because it can feel a range of emotions, right?
Yeah, that's part of it, but it's also rationality and goal directedness and autonomy are also a part of what we consider. I mean, so I agree what you're saying. Like, we don't want to give moral standing to a statue or something like that and treat it that way. But something that's as cognitively sophisticated as we are, that can move, that has its own goals. I mean, it's not just a stimulus response machine. This thing is on the world and behaving in ways that are similar to you and I, but without any feelings or emotion. It doesn't seem to me like a mistake to give it.
Yeah, good. No, I mean, these are the kind of debates that we need, that people need to have, because see, one point in the book, in the chapters on machine consciousness, is that consciousness and intelligence can in fact come apart in the artificial arena.
Right.
So with synthetic beings, we have a kind of correlation thesis. I mean, with biological beings.
Right, yeah.
You know, we believe rightly that there's a correlation between, you know, the sophisticated cognitive systems we see in non-human animals, some of them, and humans, and consciousness. Like, we rightly infer, gee, you know, my dog, it's, you know, and general intelligence. It has multimodal representation, sensory experiences. It feels like something to be it. And so we're used to that, right? But I call it the cute and fluffy fallacy. Like, we should watch out, because you can already turn on, you know, go on Google and just Google Japanese androids, and you will see very like androids. It's creeptastic, man. It's crazy. It's crazy. So, you know, they're not sentient. They're in fact not even intelligent yet, like, because the people working on them, they're amazing, but they're not working on the AI component. They're working on the physical component. But I mean, just because something looks, you know, human, or, you know, looks fluffy or whatever, I mean, you know, the field of robotics is very creative, doesn't mean that it deserves the same legal protections. I mean, for us to make that move, I think we really have to consider what it feels like from the inside to be that thing.
So I guess maybe the problem is, or not the problem, but one of the things that we're sort of crossing paths on is that I'm not suggesting they get the same consideration, but that they should have some consideration. That it still seems like,
no, I think
like you'd be doing something wrong if you turned them off or arbitrarily, or if you said, I want you go to the Android store, as you do in your book, and say, I want somebody to clean my house. And then the intelligent thing says, I'd rather not clean the house. I prefer to lift rocks, or I don't know, whatever. It just still seems like it would be morally wrong to say, no, you're going to clean the house, irrespective of whether they're conscious.
You know, we're making a cute and fluffy fallacy if it's not conscious. If it's conscious, absolutely. But I mean, otherwise, it's just us applying, you know, our feelings about the biological arena to something that is no different, ethically speaking, than AlphaGo. That doesn't mean
AlphaGo doesn't have complex
value in other ways, though. I mean, it could be a very important object. I mean, these are interesting ethical questions. I mean, some people, like if you go into the environmental ethics literature, for instance, I mean, some people will suggest that state parks have instrumental value or something like that. I mean, these are the kind of debates people should be having. You know,
I mean, I feel guilty when I stop Roomba from going where Roomba wants.
Intrinsic value, I'm sorry.
Yeah, intrinsic value.
Intrinsic value. Sorry, I'm tired. I've had like...
You have a giant mug of coffee, so yeah, you're...
huge coffee. I'm on like number 3 already. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. But I mean, I feel guilty when I stop Roomba from going where Roomba wants. And I don't think it's because it's cute and fluffy. I just think because there's a sense in which it's autonomous, and you should respect autonomy.
Not autonomous.
There's a sense in which it is autonomous. It decides where it wants to go on its own. No one tells it how to drive around the house. So in that sense, it's got some autonomy.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, you know, I was just thinking as we were talking about like how you define autonomous weapons, and yeah, I mean, sure, in a really watered down sense, you know, but that doesn't make me think it has rights or deserves rights.
Yeah, so I guess you think that to have any important sense of autonomy, you have to be conscious.
Well, autonomous weapons aren't conscious, and they're important. They're scary as
morally important. I know it. Yeah, but right, exactly.
Yeah,
they're very scary.
Well, to figure in the category of sentient beings, you know, I mean, so ethical theories traditionally have special concern for beings that can feel pain and whatnot. Now, I think to go back to what you mentioned earlier about rationality, and I think you mentioned deontology and whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really good point. And again, see, we didn't expect these things to come apart. We didn't expect the capacity to be sophisticated intellectually and consciousness to come apart, and they might.
Right.
I think that's really, really interesting. 4 theories that argue that we deserve, legal protections because we are rational.
Right.
And we certainly will not be, I mean, if AI continues, if we develop general intelligence, we're not going to be the most rational beings on the planet, because I bet you AIs, if we develop them properly, could overcome a lot of cognitive biases that we overcome, and maybe even be more rational than us.
And you might imagine them debating whether we have moral standing, because that we can feel, but they're not rational. I mean, I can imagine super intelligent, non-conscious beings saying to themselves, we're the ones with the moral standing because look how rational we are. And look at these guys, they're like ants. So who cares if they feel? I mean, maybe ants feel, but a lot of people still move out of the way to build a highway. So it seems rationality is something that's important. And
I'm writing another book on, the space of intelligences, like our place in the space of intelligent systems. And it's on all these issues.
Interesting.
Because I think that this is a really rich area for discussion. And, you're just hitting all the key issues here from an ethics standpoint. And also, consider the way we treat non-human animals. We are constantly justifying our behavior by pointing at the fact that we're more intelligent.
Right.
But if AIs are able to overtake us in the intelligence department, we really need to start paying attention to what we're doing.
Exactly.
I think the key thing here is sentience.
Yeah.
And conscious experience. And there's some interesting debates in neuroscience right now about the neural basis of consciousness. And some people, like Christoph Koch, with this hot zone theory, are saying really what makes us conscious beings is the sensory areas of the brain.
Right. Yeah. And so if they don't have that, they'll lack, if we don't design something like that into them, they'll lack that. I mean, I guess I would quibble about cognitive consciousness. And I think there is a phenomenology of thought and those sorts of things, which may not depend on that.
Yeah. You're interested in that. You're a higher order person, right?
I spend some time thinking about higher order thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a really, really interesting debate. And like, I was reading Joseph's book. Great book. Yeah, I blurbed it. Yeah, I really enjoyed that a lot. Yeah, that's a good book, and he's more. I mean, I guess my position, like with all these things, is I will defend it if someone attacks it, but that doesn't mean that I really am a true believer. Like, I don't really think of myself as a higher order guy. I think of myself as like, so many people misunderstand it and berate it that I will defend it, and it could be true for all we know. I think Joseph's book really helped me, and I'll look forward to reading more of your papers. It's always so hard to find time. And I'm the same way, like in terms of personal identity, right? I mean, I just feel very strongly that we probably are such finite beings that we don't know the answer to the question about the nature of persons. So we have to take very seriously the whole range of views.
Yeah.
And that's where I see my job. And I hope I'm intellectually honest about that. But if you ask me like late at night or whatever, I'd probably say like 2 nights a week, I'd be voting for parfait. Okay. I'd be like, there's no person. There's no self. This is rubbish.
Okay.
Interesting. I get real mystical and I'm like, there's a creator, this is all too weird. We're conscious. The fact that we're conscious implies that there's some really weird shit going on in the universe we don't get. And look how confused we are about space-time.
And what about the other 2 days?
Yeah, those are the only days of the week I think about this stuff. The rest of the time I'm drinking.
Okay, good. That's a healthy lifestyle. I approve of it. I wonder if I could ask you, since we're talking about consciousness, obviously, I wonder if I could ask you about your wait and see approach, because you kind of criticize both the Chinese room and also the dancing, fading qualia arguments in different ways. And I guess I don't really, I mean, yeah, we don't want to get into a protracted argument about or debate about this, but I think it was sort of went by really quick that you say, oh, well, the systems reply, and that kind of takes care of Searle, and end of story. And it doesn't seem to me that's really the end of story, because one of your main argument there, as I understood it, was that there's a fallacy, and the dog agrees with what I'm saying. Obviously, Teddy's very smart, I can tell. But you're like, there's a fallacy here that Searle's reasoning depends. See, he's agreeing. That Searle's argument depends on the fact that, well, since he doesn't understand it, then the system doesn't understand it. Is that a fair way of characterizing your criticism of him before?
Yeah. I know Teddy doesn't like Searle after what's been in the papers.
Yeah, I could see that.
Naughty.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Yeah.
Oh my god.
He's obviously a jerk of a person, but
he's my old professor. Oh yeah.
You had classes with him, really? I
walked out of his class third week because I didn't like the vibe.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
I didn't know he was famous, though. I probably would have put up with that. I wasn't a philosophy major.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
I probably would have put up with the little obnoxiousness.
Yeah. No, that's smart. You can get from what he's written more than from interacting with him.
He writes super clear. Yeah. So okay. So I like the Chinese room with students. I like bringing that up a lot. And the thing is, though, yeah, I think something like the systems reply works, but not in the context, like, I don't think that the Chinese room is a conscious system. So what I'm thinking is, if you ran something like a Chinese room in the context of a very sophisticated AI, so you'd have a very complicated room.
Right.
You could still do it. You could still run that thought experiment. Then I think the systems reply works. So, at some point, these sophisticated systems may very well be capable of consciousness, right? And in the case of the brain, seems like what's going on, right? I mean, the brain can be decomposed functionally into constituent parts. Now, what parts are responsible and how does it work? I mean, it seems to be consciousness is a synergistic relationship between various components of the brain.
Right.
Right.
So but why isn't it? So what the Chinese room argument, which I find kind of pretty convincing, actually, and I don't really find the systems reply all that convincing. So the kind of way I understood it was that the reason why it matters whether Searle understands it or not is because he's the CPU. So he's whatever system, it can be a synergistic or distributed, whatever you want, but there's a system in there which is doing the symbol manipulation. And that's supposed to be the thing which is understanding the Chinese. So if he's doing...
one component of the brain is conscious.
But there's a system in the brain that's conscious. There is a neural correlate of consciousness, which is, one assumes, kind of a minimal set of activations which are sufficient for a conscious experience.
Yeah, so, this gets into the murky issue of the neural basis of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, surely there are different parts of the brain that together give rise to consciousness. And that's not to say there's not something else. I mean, maybe it's because there's something, going on we don't understand. It's not physical. I don't know. But I mean, you've got the brainstem, which is necessary for wakefulness and alertness. And then you've got arguably the thalamus, which loops in, there's this thalamocortical loop, which has been implicated in like the global workspace. And then there's the sensory hot zone. And then there are different areas of the brain, which if they're offline, cause all sorts of tweaks to consciousness and may actually be part of the neural basis, like the claustrum.
Right.
Okay, the debate is a mess, right?
For sure, yeah.
For sure, yeah. Indicating, again, the stance of metaphysical humility. But, I mean, just if you say isolate one part of the brain, like say the claustrum, and you go, well, the claustrum's not conscious, so therefore the brain isn't conscious, that would be a problematic line of reasoning.
Right.
So
Yeah.
with the Chinese room thought experiment, the reasoning is that Searle, i.e. the CPU guy, is not conscious. So therefore, the whole thing isn't conscious. And see, that's not correct.
But it is correct if the
Correct.
CPU is the thing which is supposed to be doing. So if you say, yeah, you take out the brainstem and you're still conscious, yeah, but I like the frontal cortex more than the hot zone. So I guess I'd say I'd pick on that. But whatever the system in the brain that it is, unless you think, which maybe you do, I'm not sure. Unless you think that the entire brain is the minimal NCC, then there's got to be some, unless you think that, there's got to be some set of brain activations, actions, or whatever. And if you take that, if you say, well, that's not conscious, then the brain's not conscious.
Okay.
Right? So there is something in there which this kind of reasoning works on. And the Chinese room is trying to pick up on that. Look, whatever it is doing, it's not just manipulating symbols according to syntactic transformations.
Yeah, but
because that doesn't do it. That doesn't generate the understanding.
Okay, to go back to the brain analogy, it's the end of the day. So see, the thing is, Searle's carrying out the causal activities. So nothing's been taken out, if you will.
Right.
But the objection is merely that the homunculus inside the box isn't conscious, right?
Right.
All right. Yeah, I don't find that compelling at all because,
but
the causal activities, surely we all agree. Well, maybe we don't, but that the different components of the brain help to synchronize and give rise to conscious experience. And there's no homunculus in there, right?
Right.
So, to me, I don't find the argument compelling.
Right, but it's not so much that it's a homunculus, it's just that the causal work that's being done doesn't generate the understanding.
But, I don't see why it doesn't. Just because one neuron or one mini column or the claustrum doesn't itself understand doesn't mean that the brain as a whole doesn't understand. And similarly for the Chinese room.
So, but to
put it another way, the argument proves too much because if it's right, then it should prove that the brain isn't conscious.
If what it's doing is merely manipulating symbols, then yeah, that's right.
Well, I think you can do the whole thing. I know Searle was actually kind of sympathetic to connectionism, but it's really about, any kind of causal relationships whatsoever that can be executed by something at a lower level. And then
I guess I would.
But the thing at the lower level isn't conscious.
Yeah, I guess I don't agree with that way of putting it.
Yeah, and you could do that for the brain, and so the argument proves too much, right? The hard part is, damn, it's mysterious why we're conscious. You're absolutely right.
Well, that is true, but let me just try one more time. I know it's late, and we've
that's all right.
So I don't want to make your day even worse by dragging this out. But
you're not making it bad.
Okay.
While I talk.
Exactly. Okay. Get your emotional support dog over here. I'm talking about some brutal stuff here. Hey, Teddy. It does seem like, okay, so suppose there, for argument's sake, we have a hot zone. I wouldn't say it's in the posterior region of the brain, but anyway, suppose there is one. And you figure out what the cause and effects of it are, and then you duplicate those, and then it doesn't result in consciousness, then that's an objection that's not the kind of objection you're making. So if you whatever system in the brain is, let's imagine, responsible for conscious experience, and you duplicate the causal interactions of that system and don't get consciousness, then you have a problem for the way you're duplicating it, which I thought was the basis of your chip test and all that other stuff. I thought this was sort of...
Yeah, it's close to the chip test.
But that's what the Chinese room is really getting at. As I understand it, is you're duplicating the way this thing works. The fact that it's a guy doing it doesn't imply homuncularism or something like that. He could be a distributed system. There could be...
But I'm saying it could be conscious if it was a more sophisticated system. I'm saying that.
No, I know. Yeah, right. So you can make the system as complicated as you want, but...
I think it would be conscious then. If you wired it together, right? I mean,
right, but I agree with you. But my point is, so I'm not trying to convince you, but I'm just trying to get at the objection that you have to the complicated Sanskrit room. Like, forget Chinese. Let's do Sanskrit. So, you know, there's a complicated system. It's as complicated as the brain. There are 40 billion people in there, 86 billion actually, passing around instructions. It's a super, super complicated room. The central processing unit of that system doesn't understand Sanskrit. And that seems like an objection.
Interactions are right. And I mean, timing in the brain, like, 100 millisecond levels, all that stuff, could be very important for consciousness. As long as that's right, it's conscious. And I think the problem was that Searle's Chinese room, the argument form was that one component wasn't conscious. Something that was carrying out the requisite causal steps, but had lacked this additional layer of consciousness. And I think that that's not a good argument form. You could run it on the human brain, right? I mean, you could talk about part of the brain carrying out the requisite steps, but the matter itself not being conscious, right? You could do that.
Right.
You'd have to assume that.
I actually wrote a paper on just that idea, actually.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just don't think that kind of argument form works because.
No, I agree it doesn't work. I just don't think that's the form of the argument. That's kind of the point I'm making. So I agree that that's a bad argument form. I just don't think that's what the Chinese room is doing.
But Searle grants that he's doing the causal work. He's taking the cards in and he's doing the causal work for the system as a whole to process the algorithm that it needs to process, right? But then he's saying, but I wasn't conscious. But his consciousness is actually irrelevant to the program itself. And I'm saying it's the instantiation of the program at the causal level, like the causal components, which is the essential ingredient. And of course, that being said, I hope no listeners assume I'm suggesting that anything like a Chinese room, as Searle raised it, could be conscious. Consciousness is an extremely complex phenomena that, I don't think any of the AIs that we have nowadays are conscious either, in the sense that we, non-human animals are conscious.
Teddy's the star of this show. Yeah. Okay. So I guess we'll just have to think about it more.
Yeah, I have to think too. Like, I'm so tired. I mean, it could be that.
No, it's not that. Yeah. No, I understand. But okay. So let's table that because I do want to talk about aliens. We haven't even got to the aliens. I'm teaching a class called Life in the Universe. And this is so we're going to be talking about some of your work, obviously, because I think it's super interesting. But one of the things that comes up a lot in the book is the possibility of designing consciousness out. So you suggest maybe superintelligence they'll see it as kind of a waste of time. Everything's automated. Let's get rid of it. And then the most advanced aliens you suggest are probably going to be post-biological. That's not to say that all of them or that there's no biological life, but the most advanced aliens, ones capable of contacting us, going to be post-biological. So I guess I was a little bit curious about that because I didn't really see the outmoding as all that serious, because a lot of times what we do when we automate things is you free up our time to think about other things consciously.
Yeah. No, I hope that if we have super intelligences, either here or elsewhere in the universe, that they maximize conscious experience. They don't make these decisions. So the wait and see approach was just raising various scenarios to get people to open their minds about it, to not see.
I see. But so with respect to the aliens too, though, you think it's just
sophisticated computation? Because I don't think it is.
Sorry, I missed that last part.
Oh, yeah. I don't think consciousness is an inevitable outgrowth of sophisticated computation.
Right.
Yeah.
So I thought, again, maybe I misunderstood then, because I thought you were saying that it's most likely that intelligent life, which is capable of reaching us, would be non-conscious, as opposed to merely like, here's a possibility.
So I said that it's more likely than not that the most sophisticated alien civilizations would be post-biological. Okay.
Right.
That's not to say that they won't be conscious. That's a further step.
Okay.
But I introduced the possibility that the AIs may not be conscious. So that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I hope that, you know, and this is why philosophy is so important. I hope that civilizations mull over the implications of synthetic intelligence and consider, like, if you're going to upgrade your brain, you also should bear in mind what it does to consciousness.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I guess I was joining those two things together in a way that I probably shouldn't have.
Well, I mean, I think also what happens a lot with my work is, and people don't realize this, when you write op-eds and when, you know, the media interviews you, they choose the headlines.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, I've been written up. I mean, I didn't even grant interviews to places like the Daily Mail or whatever. I'll wake up in the morning and there'll be some article saying, you know, that I said something, and I never even talked to them on the phone.
Yeah, it's funny. Okay.
Some of the headlines are really, you know.
Yeah. Well, I saw the one that was like, mind uploading is suicide or something like that.
Yeah, no, you know, it's funny because when I woke up to that, I mean, I wrote the op-ed and they chose the headline, but that was brilliant because it got written up so much, and it was that headline was so gripping. But of course, technically, I'm not saying that it definitely is suicide of the mind to merge with AI. I'm saying we don't know, but I don't actually agree with the argument that the mind is a program.
Exactly. So have you ever read this book, Blind Sight? Do you know this, the fiction book?
You know, I have that on my list. I might even have it on the Kindle. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah,
it's really good, but I don't want to spoil it too much. If you haven't read it, I won't mention too much, but it's about aliens that are non-conscious, but highly intelligent.
Oh, maybe I'll read that on the plane.
It's a great book. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, thank you. I want to teach that philosophy and science fiction class. I used to teach that all the time. I love it.
I've never got to teach a class like that. That sounds like it would be fun.
Oh yeah. No, it's a class. The students really like it.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah, exactly.
How much they don't even want to watch films in class.
Yeah, exactly.
They really want to talk about the material.
Oh, I almost like is a non sequitur, but I did want to teach a class like just using episodes of Black Mirror, like just show one episode in the class and then discuss it afterwards. But some of them are too like grim. I think I'd get complaints from some.
Well, you know, a lot of classes just aren't cheery.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that is such a great idea. I did mean to teach a whole class on Black Mirror, but I cheated and did a whole bunch of other stuff too. But I did teach some Black Mirror stuff.
Wow.
The students really are into it, man. They were
so into it.
Watching Black Mirror like a couple years ago when it came out. I mean, they were watching it like crazy. And I think it's important, you know, to use science fiction to convey the import of these issues. It's like the lingua franca, like no matter what field someone's from, talking about techno-philosophy. You know, it's like they could be from AI with no background in philosophy whatsoever. You know, they could be from cognitive science. You could just go, man, this was in iRobot. This was in, you know, the robot stories or something like that, and people get it. Yeah,
exactly. It's like Greg Egan and those kinds of, exactly. So there's a lot of good work there. But so the post-biological alien bit, there's no commitment on your part to their being non-conscious. Like you assume they'll be conscious.
Yeah, no, I don't know how things are going to play out. I mean, you know, like I say in the book that if you built like, you know, a functional isomorph of the human brain, if it was actually technically possible, then you'd end up with a conscious being, right? Now, maybe somewhere somebody will do that.
Right. And they should have done it already. I mean, yeah. I guess I don't think, I don't really think if you build a functional isomorph, you'd get a conscious being. This kind of plays off the chip test thing and the ACT test, or do you call it the ACT? I don't know what you call it, how you pronounce the acronym.
We forgot. I don't.
Okay.
I honestly, I forgot what it even stands for.
The artificial consciousness test, I think.
What? What is it?
Artificial consciousness test, I think.
Oh, is that? Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, it would.
It's so weird doing book interviews because it's like, shit, I forgot what I wrote.
Yeah, exactly. That's, yeah. You're on to the next thing already.
Yeah.
But so I would just wonder what you would say to someone like kind of a skeptic like me, who says, you know, there's no amount of that kind of stuff which is going to get at the consciousness, mostly because of Chinese room sorts of considerations. I don't think any amount of passing anything like a Turing test is good enough to, like, I think it's good enough that we should give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, obviously, if there's complex systems, I err on the side of caution for ethical reasons, but not because of metaphysical reasons. But you think that this is really the best way of getting at sort of actually whether they're conscious or not, is by doing a combination of chip test and ACT test.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because, okay, so think about it. Okay, it's not untenable to think that an AI could fool us.
Right.
It could, you know, verbally sophisticated enough and it could look human. I think, you know, if you just look at even, you know, our iPhones, they're getting better. Siri's getting better and Alexa, right?
Yeah.
There's so much money pouring into it. I think 10 years from now, there'll be like sophisticated conversations going on and people will be confused.
Yes.
You know, and then pair that up with the Japanese androids. It's like, geez, you know, there's going to be some weird stuff coming down. Really weird stuff, right? So the ACT test, I think, is necessary because, especially at the R&D stage, before the systems have all that data,
right,
we need to figure out if it feels like anything to be that AI. Otherwise, people are going to be giving rights away. They're, you know, marrying AIs. They're going to be leaving their money, you know, and it would be sad. I think it's disingenuous for, you know, anybody selling the product to put forward the idea that it feels like something to be those creatures. Behavioral tests are essential. The chip test is cool. I mean, I don't know if I talked about it. I don't think I did. It's just a simple observation, really. It's just that if humans start putting chips in their head, say, to deal with brain disorders, the way, well, it's already happening, like with Ted Berger, we talked about with the artificial hippocampus. Suppose we start replacing areas of the brain responsible for the neural basis of consciousness. And by the way, Richard, this, I think, is a great way to learn something productive about the neural basis of consciousness. I mean, if somebody has a defect, you know, and I mean, you know, the only way to help them is to put a chip in their heads, then that's an ethical experiment.
Right.
So if we do that, and if we find that people's consciousness, you know, is normal, right? I mean, it depends on the context, what's going on, but, you know, then I think we can infer that chips are the right stuff in principle, that kind of chip design, that substrate, and that if we put those chips into an artificial intelligence with the right sort of architecture, it may very well be conscious.
Right.
So that would be a wake-up call to be careful the way we treat with creatures.
Yeah, I wonder, so what do you mean by if we can tell that their consciousness hasn't changed? Because it's not clear to me that you really could actually tell, because if the thing is functionally equivalent, then they're going to say all the same stuff, but that, I mean, they could have some kind of weird form of neglect. They could have some...
though. I mean, like Oliver Sacks wrote books on this stuff. I mean, if there's some deficit, I mean, look at blindsight, look at blindness denial.
Right.
I mean,
syndrome.
Oh God, split brains. Shit. I mean, those are even spouses apparently didn't notice.
Right.
And you stick them in clinical settings and you devise clever ways. I mean, it may take a while to figure this out.
But we haven't figured it. I mean, with the split brain stuff, there's still, I mean, there's this conference at NYU just recently where they were still to this day trying to figure out, is the right side conscious, or is it, you know, Ledoux, we mentioned him earlier, his view is that the right side is an unconscious processor yoked to the conscious side of the brain. The other side is, no, there's a consciousness over there. We have no clue on how to answer that sort of question.
I mean, but I think we can find deficits. That was all I was saying. I mean, I agree with you. See, this is because, again, science is not philosophy.
Yeah.
These are really philosophical issues. But I mean, in that case, it's a delicate dance balancing the scientific and the philosophical considerations. And that's like super exciting to see kinds of discussions. Yeah, no, I have a PhD student writing a thesis on this topic right now.
Oh, awesome.
Janelle Salisbury. Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep a lookout for that then.
Yeah, she's terrific. Yeah.
Cool. But the blindsight cases, Anton syndrome, there are deficits that are findable because there's deficits that are neuroanatomical. But in the case we're imagining, there's no neuroanatomical deficit. Like the thing is doing all the same work. So all the same behaviors will be produced, one assumes, and it's not clear that one would notice a change in. So if you, in my view, the way I think of it, if you replace my visual cortex, I'm not going to have any conscious experience. I don't think that I would have any conscious. So if I go around saying that I do have conscious experience, it's just because all the causal connections are there.
That's where it's the property essences again, Richard. Honestly, like
I hate metaphysics.
Like back to, you know, the debate over dispositions and David Lewis, because I think what's happening here is, and this is so hard for people not philosophers to understand, I think, and that's why I didn't even go into this in the book, because I just thought, oh boy, right? But I mean, some people will claim that you can take all the dispositions and just satisfy those dispositions by a non-conscious system.
Right.
I have a different view of properties. It's more like John Heil, Charlie Martin. It's like a two-sided view.
Right.
I don't think you could truly, Teddy, sorry.
Oh, it's fine. I like what he's saying.
Oh, he's so cute. He's oh my God. It's gonna start howling.
It's probably time for you to feed him. I
just gave him a bunch of cheese.
Okay.
Yeah, he's happy. But you know, if you have something which does all the causal work, it also has that same categorical nature as well. They're tied together. So
yeah,
I have some manuscripts on this I've been meaning to finish, because I know I sort of should make an argument for. I mean, I have a sort of different approach to it's, you know, I just haven't had a chance. But John Heil and Charlie Martin have done related papers, and I really appreciate that too.
Is that sort of properties as powers, or?
Yeah, but I mean, even just a dispositionalist view. I mean, it's just, I think the essence here is I don't really see dispositionality and categoricity as coming apart.
I see. Okay.
And I know that many people disagree with that. You know, right now there's a, you know, tendency, because of the influence of David Lewis and D.M. Armstrong and others, to think that consciousness and its causal powers can come apart. Right.
So, but that's, I mean, makes this whole argument depend on a kind of a very controversial metaphysical theory. So the chip test, surprisingly, turns out to really only work if you take a certain view of properties, which
I don't know. I mean, so I had a debate with Eric Schwitzgebel on this, on his blog, and so you can, listeners can read what we said there.
I'll put a link to it.
I think another consideration, I mean, I do think this stuff on properties is important, and I want people to think about it. But I also think that it would be a dystopian world, you know, an authoritarian dictatorship that would, like Eric set up this case, you know, where suppose the chip makers bypass, you know, the information that would be your brain would have, where like you notice a deficit, and it, you know, the chip causes your brain to act as if it's conscious. I mean, it gets real weird.
Right.
And it's like, well, Eric, come on, FDA. I mean, you know, and why the heck would anybody want to do that? And then that chip's not isomorphic anyway to what the brain is doing.
Right, exactly.
Right? So I mean, I'm talking about a situation that could happen in North America. I mean, they're already developing brain chips, and for anything to get to the level of human clinical trials, it's going to be a pale version of the original part of the brain anyway.
Right, exactly.
Have all these bypass mechanisms. I mean, that's like, you know, these thought experiments are blast, right? I understand they're so fun to talk about, but we have to kind of push them aside a little bit to get the ethics work done in the here and now.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I guess I was just more going for, like, you get the neural stuff doing what it was doing, but it's done by a chip. Then, you know, I was always, my view was in the river of gradual replacement, there's going to be a point at which enough replacement, no consciousness. And yet,
I don't think you'd be conscious. I agree with Chalmers.
Yeah, but I don't understand why. Because Chalmers' argument is not all that great, actually, since his basic whole argument is just, it would be too weird. And then, yeah, but what about change blindness? What about partial report? Lots of weird stuff. And actually, change blindness got him to change his mind. There's a footnote in his book where he says, oh, gee, I guess fucking change blindness. What are you going to do? So there are changes that we don't notice, and it's not all that strange to be having something there blinking in and out. And so he does retract a little bit of what he previously said. Yeah. So I don't think those arguments, the empirical work, I think, is going to overturn those arguments. When we're learning
those arguments, and even if you're if you like categoricity, it also is sensible for you to say that the categoricity and the dispositions sort of correlate in a lawful way.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't get these weird scenarios where you have something that's a causal isomorph and the categoricity has shifted. In fact, you know, if you look at the traditional debates in the categoricity literature, you know, people like Simon Blackburn in that paper, Filling in Space, that was a good paper.
Yeah.
You know, he talks about those switching cases as embarrassments for the categoricity view, and the proponents of categoricity usually deny that it would be nomologically possible. So, you know, I mean, from a precautionary standpoint, to get back to the issue is, when do we decide that chips might underlie conscious experience? From a precautionary standpoint, if we see no effect in the context of human tests, then we better apply the precautionary principle to the AIs that are made of those chips on the chance, which it's not even a remote chance, it's a significant chance that they may be conscious. From an ethical standpoint, I think we need to that's the money shot, human flourishing, and more generally the flourishing of sentient beings.
Yeah, no, I agree with the precautionary principle. I guess I was just more skeptical about the chip telling us anything about the actual metaphysics, the chip test, I mean.
Well,
but certainly if they replace part of my auditory cortex and I went around saying nothing seems different to me, that would be a very good reason to take the precautionary principle seriously, I think, yeah. But I don't think it'd be any reason at all to think that actually we're still having conscious experience.
Wow. Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, the metaphysics, it's very, very intricate and difficult.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it depends on, so which part exactly where the cutoff is. But I mean, like I said, I have a pretty strong biological naturalism background. I mean, that's where I'm just an old-fashioned kind of identity theorist at heart. You know, I don't really think there's any good reason to deny the identity theory. I certainly haven't seen any. So anyway, so that's where my heart, I could be convinced, but I just don't.
Yeah, no, I respect that. I mean, I understand completely that, you know, it seems to me that to the extent that consciousness is physical, it's a biological phenomenon. And I think we could, in principle, produce it in the lab through synthetic biology and maybe through artificial intelligence in a different substrate. And the question is, could we get the dispositional properties instantiated, like in the real world, that would allow a conscious being to exist? But I think, like, as an advocate of the wait and see approach, I'm taking a here and now perspective on it, technological possibility is where it's at. It's about what the AI companies are really going to produce.
Yeah. No, I guess I would say I agree with all of that. I just one quick caveat is that I think, yeah, it would be still the brain, even if this were a simulated environment, or even if idealism was true. I think that's still the brain that in that simulated reality or in the idealistic reality which generates consciousness. So really the identity theory, I think it's kind of ultimately compatible with those other metaphysical views. What matters to me is that it's the brain that's doing it, and then the rest is kind of, you know.
We may have artificial brains right now. I mean, we may be in computer simulation. We're sitting there talking as if we're biological beings, and
exactly.
It's zeros and ones.
Exactly. That's the kind of thought behind this idea, is that even if we were in a simulated environment, it would still, all the evidence points to it's the brain. And if the brain is a simulated thing, then oh well, it's still the brain which is generating conscious experience in this simulation. Or at least that's where like I said, I'm willing to all the robot overloads in the future. I'm willing to be convinced, and certainly I think that moral stuff is more important than the metaphysical stuff. So I think that the precautionary principle and getting that stuff erring on the side of caution is way more important than like the actual truth of what's really going on.
Well, you know, we may not be able to figure out the metaphysical stuff. That's the problem, but we've got to be able to make ethical decisions.
Exactly.
I love thinking about the metaphysics, obviously, right? I mean, it's, you know, but I mean, it's hard because we don't really know what the fundamental physical laws are, or we're even capable of understanding them. We don't know why we're conscious. And even from a scientific standpoint, we haven't figured out the neural basis of consciousness. I mean, maybe that's because consciousness isn't physical.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, so I
know you recently switched sides, right? You were a physicalist and now you're not. So you're a little suspicious of physicalism.
I was a physicalist maybe like when I was a PhD student. And then I wrote a bunch of papers in the Metaphysics of Mind for the journals, arguing against physicalism. So, but always I'm friendly to the idea that the brain is computational, which is what I argued in that first book, the sort of Jerry Fodor book.
Right. Exactly. That was a great book. I like that book, actually.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy writing it.
Oh, God. Well, someday we'll have to get back together and talk about physicalism and your argument against it, and space-time and whatever proto-mentalism is, which honestly I don't understand. Because if it's just like, oh, there's some stuff which when put together, there's consciousness, that's just physicalism. But so that obviously we've been going for a long time, and I hear children wailing downstairs. So I wonder if before we sign off, if there's anything that hasn't come up which you would like to have come up before we go.
I want to thank you. Thank you for welcoming my dog on your show. Yeah,
no problem. It's been a great pleasure talking with you. I think your ideas and your perspective are just really needed in this debate. So I think it's a refreshing book. I really do hope people read it. I hope it gets a wide readership.
I hope so too.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't be surprised if it does, actually.
Well, I go on television and talk about it, so I'm hoping some people read it. I'm about to go on Fox.
You're going to go on Fox?
I want people to read it.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I go on
people read on
I don't talk politics. They know we don't talk politics.
Wow. Okay.
No, it's important. It's important. I'm working with Congress now, too. I meet with members of Congress, and I'm talking about the book over breakfast with Congress.
Wow.
So
that's awesome. I mean, that's really cool that you're doing it. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, it's stressful.
Yeah, I'll bet it's very stressful. You're gonna go on the other site. You're gonna go on Bill Maher and stuff like that.
I don't know him.
Okay.
Yeah, no, send me some suggestions. I know, because I only have my little circle of people, and that'd be cool. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind disagreement, and I love comedy. If there's a comedy show, that's my thing. I love that. I was on Neil deGrasse Tyson's show with he has a comedian, Chuck Neese. We had a great time. We were laughing our heads off.
I love that show. That's Star Talk radio show, or is that?
Oh yeah, he has a TV show too, National Geographic Channel.
Oh, I didn't know about the TV show. Okay, very cool.
Yeah, and then I go on Ancient Aliens.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. More is better.
Hilarious.
Hey, like you said, you want people to read the book, and these, no matter what your views are, these are important things to think through. And that's what I tell my students all the time. And, you know, I do this in neuroscience and all the classes I teach. These issues are less science fiction than we think at this point. They're coming at us, whether we like it or not. If we don't think about them, then it's going to happen to us instead of us doing it.
Yeah, that worries me because it's all about the money.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, thanks, Richard. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you too. So I'll sign off. Hang on just a second. I'll say bye off air. But
okay.
All right. See you later. All right.